Hello. Welcome to the audiovisual translation of the BBI Report. I am grateful for you having taken your time to come listen to this audiovisual report. This marks the beginning of Chapter 8 of 12 of the report, and Annex 1, 2 and 3. Kindly note we will have the translation of the BBI report chapter after chapter until we reach the last chapter of the report. Also note, this audiovisual report is created by the use of text synthesizer, hence there might be alliteration in the pronunciation of some words, particularly Swahili words, but this is not a big issue as you can clearly decode all the wording in this audiovisual report. Kindly feel free to share the link to this report with other members of our community. Having said that, without further ado, let's jump into Chapter 8 of 12 of the report. Chapter 8. Corruption. 128. The growing public perception of Kenya having a rigged system that rewards cronyism and corruption, as opposed to the productive and hardworking, is the greatest risk to Kenya's cohesion and security. Tackling corruption is the single most important mission Kenya has now. 129. So ubiquitous is the abuse of public trust that the thieves are often praised and put on podiums, while the honest are called fools for refusing to partake of graft. So common is the corruption in our transactions that we compromise our birthrights, safety and security, our dignity, our relationships, our responsibilities, and even all our other rights. It has led to many of our children believing that honesty is a devalued principle, and so with every passing generation honor recedes even further from our shores. We are all responsible, but leaders at every level and in every sector bear special responsibility. Their abuse of office is the leading driver of our dishonest society. 130. Since the promulgation of the 2010 Constitution, attempts to enact legislation to give effect to the broad constitutional principles against corruption have been largely ineffective. This is due to the vested interests in the political and business class that seek self-enrichment through manipulating the budgeting and spending of public resources. Among the public, there is almost total consensus that this area of the Constitution requires urgent attention. At one level, there is concern that the current institutional architecture, which should ensure integrity in the public service, is either inadequate or misconceived. At another level, institution after institution set up to enforce public integrity and fight corruption has come up short. 131. Many Kenyans told the task force that it is the lure of illicit financial gain through the holding of elected or appointed positions that drives much of the aggressive and negative ethnicization and even militarization of political competition. The majority would agree that the stability and success of Kenya's constitutional order depends a great deal on the integrity and transparency of Kenyan leadership at every level and branch of government. It is therefore imperative for this provision in the Constitution to have enough teeth to shape the membership and behavior of the leadership class. 132. Corruption, defined here simply as the abuse of entrusted power for private gain, is common at all levels of Kenyan society. It had led to extremely low trust by citizens towards public institutions, deeply undermines service delivery, and contributes to national and human insecurity. Participating in corruption comes at relatively low cost. There are no real barriers to entry for the unethical and unqualified. It is a threat to national prosperity, continuity, and morale. 133. Adoption and implementation of Chapter 6 of the Constitution has proven inadequate, despite the substantial amounts of legislation, policy, and political pronouncement on this challenge of corruption and lack of integrity by those entrusted with public office. At core, the profound concern is that the challenge is beyond legislation and lies in the fact that political, executive, legislative, and judicial cultures not supporting integrity initiatives. 134. His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta has issued firm directives that would have gone a long way to preventing, deterring, and punishing corruption in Kenya. Unfortunately, several of them have not been implemented, while others have been frustrated by corruption fighting back. The task force believes that all further recommendations must begin with a call for the full implementation of the directives that the president has issued in the last few years. 135. Cartels are one of the greatest obstacles to the achievement of honest government that wins the trust of citizens, investors, and all fair-minded stakeholders in Kenya's political and economic system. These cartels have been born out of a system of governance and public service that allows individuals and groups to block, redirect, or distort service provision, policymaking, policy implementation, and political and technical oversight. This rent-seeking and gatekeeping in the public service has led to corruption and the growth of a hidden layer of power and influence, what Kenyans popularly term cartels, that seeks to shape public policy for its own benefit. No matter what reforms are undertaken in the political system, the inability to eliminate the hold of cartels on Kenya's systems of budgeting, regulation, procurement, and the shaping of markets will mean that our national desire for an inclusive Kenya will come to nothing. The task force strongly recommends that far-reaching initiatives to eliminate rent-seeking and gatekeeping be applied with determination. Key to them is reform of government decision-making processes to ensure the mapping and elimination of perverse incentives. 136. Prevention is better than cure. Rather than chase after the corrupt and fraudulent after they have committed their crimes, we should prioritize prevention and ensure we are hiring managers with a record of effective and accountable management. Foremost should be building systems that facilitate, promote and enable ethical conduct and responsibility in public resource management. Practically, that means that ethics training and assessment should be regular features at every level of the public service. Deterrence can be assisted using spot checks and sting operations. Incentives for promotion will emerge from performance assessment frameworks for mid to senior level officers that incorporate ethics and anti-corruption. For instance, promotions of managers in a position to have known about corruption scandals or investigations at departments and agencies should be frozen. To incorporate their support in the anti-corruption fight. 137. As a common-sense proposal, it should be noted that the privatization of government-owned entities undertaking business functions can reduce corruption and add to efficiency and cost-effectiveness. Even those who believe in the greater role of the state in the economy can acknowledge that the public sector needs to prove that it has corruption under control before being entrusted with the trust to run services better than the private sector. Until such a state is in place, Kenyans' public resources are better protected by shrinking the footprint of the state and allowing greater competition in the provision of services. Therefore, at a minimum, there should be a clearer and tougher rethink on what functions in government can be better delivered by a competitive private sector. 138. At a minimum, we should undertake the following major recommendations, including those in longer list contained in Annex 1. Major recommendations 139. Free Kenya from cartel capture. The perception of a rigged economy is one of the greatest risks to a secure, stable and united Kenya. It serves as a major incentive for the utilization of divisive ethnic politics. A. Undertake a rigorous intelligence-led review of the hold of cartels in crucial aspects of the economy and the public systems of budgeting, procurement, regulation and the rigging of markets. B. Banks and banking executives that are found to be laundering money and enabling corruption should be sentenced to heavy fines and jail terms. In cases of repeated offenses, the central bank should endeavor to withdraw licenses and levy other heavy penalties. C. Utilize anti-corruption sting campaign that targets lawyers, judges and legislators, especially in cases that are difficult to prosecute due to the evidential component. D. Punish facilitators of tax evasion and money laundering in the private sector. E. Carry out a thorough audit of negative legal, policy, and administrative incentives in the public service that undermine value for money, fairness in service delivery, and effectiveness. Turn the findings into policy initiatives and implement them. F. In addition to any custodial sentence of those found guilty of economic crimes, include punitive fines, with the proceeds being used to assist vulnerable Kenyans. G. Incentives for whistleblowing. Provide material incentives for information that leads to successful asset seizure and/or prosecution for corruption-related crimes. Consider offering a 5% share of proceeds recovered from anti-corruption prosecutions or actions to the whistleblower, whose information is necessary to the success of the asset seizure or successful prosecution. This should be done with due regard for the privacy and safety of the whistleblower. 140. Use prevention and deterrence by ensuring widespread ethics awareness, rewarding whistleblowing and assessments of performance. A. Incorporate ethics and performance assessment training in every public service course required for promotion or transfer. B. Raise ethical workers by requiring that educational curricula from the earliest to the most advanced levels should specifically include ethics and civics components as a major prerequisite for graduation. C. Review the Cabinet Secretaries' and Principal Secretaries' performance assessment framework to incorporate their support for the anti-corruption fight. D. Establish a whistleblowing mechanism, including protection for whistleblowers working in the public service. D. All contracts for senior appointees should have clear and practical performance benchmarks, with rules for layoffs on failure to perform. Also, review all senior officers on contract biannually and lay off appointees who have not performed or whose MDAs have been implicated in corruption. F. Prevent the use of legal intimidation by public officers against whistleblowers and the media reporting on corruption and fraud. Amend the Defamation Act to deny all public officers a course of action where allegations are made against them in their official capacity regarding matters of ethics and corruption. 141. Public officers should not be in business with the government. Address conflicts of interest by reducing public officer involvement in business with the government. A. No public officer can do business with the government. B. The spouse of a public officer shall not do business with the government but can engage in the private sector. C. To engage in business outside government, outside of his or her regular working hours, a state officer and senior public officer shall obtain prior approval from the reporting officer of his or her state body. This approval shall need to document that the work or business is not prohibited by separate legislation and does not constitute a conflict of interest or an obstacle to orderly performance of regular tasks and does not impinge upon the reputation of the public service. D. A public officer shall be obliged to submit a written report to the Ethics and Integrity Commission, (NEW), any financial or other interest in which he or she, his or her spouse or common law partner, child or parent, may have in the decisions of the MDA in which he or she is employed or the government. D. The spouse or common law partner, child or parent of a public officer shall be obliged to submit a written report to the proposed Ethics Commission of any financial or other interest in which he or she, his or her may have in the decisions of the MDA that employs the public servant. F. A public officer shall be obliged to submit written notification to his or her immediate superior of ownership of shares and bonds or financial and other interest in companies with which the state body in which he or she is employed is performing administrative operations and which may constitute a conflict of interest. G. Senior public officers who represent the government on the boards of private companies should clearly indicate any personal conflicts of interests in matters under deliberation. H. A public officer shall not make decisions nor participate in decision-making which affects the financial or other interests of his or her spouse or common law partner, child or parent, individuals or legal persons with whom he or she has had formal or business contacts within the past 5 years, individuals or legal persons who have financed his or her election campaign within the past 5 years. 142. Wealth declaration forms should be made public. The leadership and senior management of national and county government executives, elected and senior judicial officers, should adhere to public personal wealth and financial disclosure that includes a written narrative of how wealth above KSHS 50 million was acquired. This includes the president, the cabinet, governors, principal secretaries, CEOs and chairpersons of parastatals and companies with GOK shareholding. The declaration should be filed and made available on the websites of their respective service commissions and should include shareholdings, remunerated employment, family and business trusts, real estate, government contracts, registered directorships, partnerships, liabilities, bonds, investments, savings investment accounts, any asset worth over KSHS 10 million, any other substantial sources of income, gifts over KSHS 50,000 in the course of duty, sponsored travel by non-government entities, and membership of any organizations that may present a conflict of interest. 143. Resignation. Leaders should take political responsibility for negligent or poor quality government actions that lead to disasters by resigning to allow Kenyans to see that a new direction in management is possible. Leaders and managers should understand that resignation is not only appropriate where direct responsibility is established. It helps start with a new slate so the changes that the institution requires can be undertaken. It shows an honorable regard for the Kenyan people and bravely assumes responsibility. 144. Digitization. Make Kenya a 100% e-services nation by digitizing all government services, processes, payment systems, and record keeping, and ensure they are secured from criminal tampering. 145. Cut down on wastage and moral jeopardy of government-owned entities being careless managers in expectation of government bailouts. A. Strengthen the capacity of the controller of budget to be able to detect and respond in a timely manner to misappropriation, wastage, and illegal processes. B. As His Excellency The president directed in November 2015, streamline parastatals through a renewed focus on core business and cutting down on wastage by enacting the Parastatal Reforms Bill and not building up the moral jeopardy of some depending on infusions of public resources to stay in business. C. Rationalize all government-owned enterprises and enact Go Bill to bring all GO's expenditures under control with common user benchmarks, independent valuations of projects and value for money audits on completed projects. 146. Increase public confidence in the judiciary. Increase public confidence in the judiciary, recognizing that the core constitutional principles in Kenya are the separation of powers between arms of government and accountability to the people of Kenya. The independence of the judiciary must be protected as a fundamental principle, but it should also be accountable to the people of Kenya. A. Create the position of special magistrates and judges to deal with the most grievous cases of drug trafficking, corruption, terrorism, and other serious criminal offenses, and make special security arrangements for these magistrates and judges to be provided for by the state. B. The powers of the Judicial Service Commission to discipline judges should be expanded so that the commission can legally deal with lesser disciplinary offenses by judges that affect the value of justice delivered without resulting to the constitutional measure of removal from office. C. To strengthen the process of responding to complaints in the judiciary, the Office of the Judiciary Ombudsman needs to be revamped to be accessible and responsive to the public. D. Advertise to Kenyans that they have a choice to take their complaints about members of the judiciary to the Judiciary Ombudsman or the Commission on Administrative Justice. Thank you for taking your time to listen to this audiovisual translation of the BBI Report. This marks the end of Chapter 8 of the BBI Report and the beginning of Chapter 9 of the 12 chapters, plus Annex 1, 2 and 3. If you have found this audiovisual report to be of help in understanding the BBI report, kindly share it link with other members of our community who may not have ample time to read the report but can manage to listen to this audiovisual report as they engage themselves in doing something else. Lastly, for the time it took us to compile this audiovisual report, we will be so much grateful if you can subscribe to our channel and hit the notification button so that you can know when we upload the other chapters of the BBI report. Asanteni sana. See you in Chapter 9 of the BBI report in audiovisual format. I'm Naf. And it's not yet enough till we hit the last chapter. Cheers.